My mother killed my father. I said it calmly, staring into the steam rising from my cup of tea. No one believed me. Of course they didn't. I used to be the only daughter who believed in their eternal love story. My father died 3 months ago from a sudden heart attack, leaving behind a vast estate and an old, shadowy house in New Orleans. Throughout the funeral, my mother didn't shed a single tear. She just stood there, silent, her eyes deep and unnervingly serene. Back then, I thought it was strength. Now I know it was calculation. I've turned that house upside down. I found the letters, the confessions that were never sent, the records colder than steel. But don't pity me. I've been preparing for this for a long time. The truth has been buried too deep, and only I, will be the one to dig it up. Even if it means burying my own past along with it. And you? Have you ever uncovered a truth that shattered everything you thought you knew? If so, tell me your story. They say grief comes in waves, but in this house, it never crashes, it lingers. It seeps into the wallpaper, curls up in the corners of the hallway, and hums low beneath the floorboards. It wears my mother's perfume and speaks in whispers that only I seem to hear. 3 months have passed since we buried him. The flowers from the funeral have long wilted, but the scent of death never really left. And neither did the silence. My mother, Evelyn, has always been composed. Not cold, just careful. Her every gesture choreographed, her words meticulously chosen. She was never one for loud affection, but I used to think it was elegance. Now I wonder if it was concealment. She still wakes at 6 every morning. The sound of the kettle hissing is the only real heartbeat in this house now. She walks past my room without pause, dressed in her silk robe, humming some old jazz tune as if morning were a style choice. This morning, she looked me in the eye and said, "It's time you moved on, Rebecca. He wouldn't want you drowning in sadness." I stared at her, searching her face for any crack in that perfect porcelain exterior. Nothing, not even a flicker of guilt. "You're right," I replied. "It's time I moved on." But I wasn't talking about grief. I was talking about the truth. I first found the letters 2 weeks ago. They were hidden in a false bottom drawer in her armoire, tucked beneath yellowed silk slips and old keepsakes. At first, I thought they were love letters from my father. The handwriting was elegant, foreign, too romantic for my father's terse style. Then I saw the name. Charles, not my father. My heart thudded, not from heartbreak, but from clarity. A cruel, inevitable clarity that seemed to align with all the pieces that never fit. I didn't read them all at once. I couldn't. I rationed them like poison, swallowing each one slowly over days. With every line, Evelyn unraveled before me, her words intimate, lustful, manipulative. The letters spoke of plans, of desperation, of ownership. She wrote about my father not as a man she loved, but as an obstacle, a cage. She wanted the house, the land, the accounts. She said Charles could give her passion, but my father could give her power. And then came the letter dated just 1 week before his death. "It'll be in his tea, as always. But this time, I'll make sure the dosage is enough. You said no more waiting, Charles, and I agree. I'm tired of waiting, too." My knees buckled. I remember crawling to the bathroom and throwing up until my throat burned. People talk about betrayal like it's an emotional wound. It's not. It's physical. It changes your chemistry. The ground shifts beneath you, your hands no longer feel like your own, and your heart begins to pump something other than blood, something darker. But I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. I didn't even cry. I began to plan. That afternoon, I sat with her in the garden. She was pruning the rose bushes, the same ones my father planted for their anniversary 15 years ago. She clipped them without sentiment, humming again. "Do you remember when Dad built this bench?" I asked casually, tapping the armrest beside me. She didn't look up. "He had too much time on his hands," she said simply. "Always needed something to fix." I smiled, my throat tight. He liked to keep his hands busy. She glanced at me then, and for the briefest second, something flickered behind her eyes. Annoyance, fear, recognition. "Why the sudden nostalgia?" she asked. "I'm just reevaluating things," I said. She nodded. "That's good, Rebecca. It's time you stopped living in the past." I wondered if she included him in that past, or just his money. That night, I returned to the letters. I read every last one. I made copies, I scanned them. I took photographs. I began cross-referencing dates, looking through old bank statements, doctor's notes, even the coroner's report. It said natural causes. Of course it did. Who would question a heart attack in a man who drank and smoked and stressed over market crashes? But now, I saw it for what it was. The perfect lie in a perfect death. I needed more. Something indisputable. Something not just to feed my rage, but to bring her down legally, publicly, utterly. And I had a feeling it wasn't just Evelyn and Charles. No woman does something like this without help. There had to be someone else. A pharmacist. A lawyer. A friend with access. The housekeeper, Marta, was the first thread I pulled. She had worked for our family for over 20 years. Quiet, loyal, discreet. But loyalty has cracks when it's built on silence and money. I waited for Evelyn to leave the house for her weekly bridge game, then invited Marta into the kitchen. I handed her a cup of coffee, black, 2 sugars, just how she liked it. "Marta, do you remember the day my father died?" She froze, cup halfway to her lips. Of course, it was sudden. He complained of stomach pain the night before, didn't he? She nodded slowly. "Yes, but he said it was just the oysters, you know how he was." "And the tea?" I asked. She didn't respond. I found the letters, Marta. Her face went pale. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, "but I need to know if you were involved, if you saw anything, if she asked you to." "No," she blurted out. "No, I never touched the tea. I saw her. She always made it herself those last few weeks." "So you knew," I said. Tears welled up in her eyes. I suspected, but what could I do? She said if I told anyone, I'd lose everything. "I'm old, Miss Rebecca. I have no one else." I reached across the table and held her hand. "You still have me." There it was, the first crack in Evelyn's empire of silence. But cracks can grow, they spread, and eventually they bring down the whole foundation. This was just the beginning. I never used to look like her. That's what everyone always said. "You've got your father's eyes," they'd smile. His nose, his stubborn chin, it used to make me proud. Now it feels like a shield I didn't know I had. But tonight, staring at myself in the mirror, I noticed something new. Not in my face, something deeper. The stillness. The calculation. The way my thoughts no longer just happen, but arrange themselves, neat and sharp, like scalpels in a tray. And I wonder, if you chase a monster long enough, do you start moving like it? The day after my conversation with Marta, I visited the family attorney, Mr. Langston. He was in his late 60s, hair slicked back like an old movie villain, voice like warm syrup. He'd always treated me like a child, even when I was 30. "You look just like your mother," he said when I walked into his office. I smiled politely, but inside I flinched. "Did you handle my father's estate?" I asked. Of course, he trusted me implicitly. He leaned back, fingers steepled. Though Evelyn took a more active role toward the end, sharp woman. Too sharp, I thought. I watched his face as I dropped the bait. "I've been going through some of Dad's files. I found some odd inconsistencies. Transfers, missing dates, even a few signatures that look wrong." His smile faltered just slightly. A twitch, a pause before he spoke. "I'm sure there's an explanation. Your father was a complicated man." There it was, the shift, the rehearsed deflection. "I'm sure there is," I said sweetly. "That's why I'd like copies of the full financial records from his final year. Every document, every signature. If you don't mind." He hesitated. "Rebecca, I have to consult with your mother before I release." "She's not the client," I interrupted, letting just enough edge into my voice. "My father was, and I'm his heir." He stared at me, a long, careful look. Then, "Very well, I'll have my assistant prepare them." But as I left his office, I knew he'd be calling her before I even reached the car. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to the lake house. A small, forgotten property my father used to escape to when the house in New Orleans got too loud, mostly from Evelyn. She hated the lake. Too damp, too isolated, too poor, she used to say, which made it perfect. The place was dusty, but intact. My father had left a lot of his old belongings there, journals, books, even a battered cassette player with a few unlabeled tapes. I lit a fire, sat on the floor with a blanket, and began digging through drawers like a surgeon through scar tissue. I found one journal from the year before he died. Much of it was mundane, stock notes, fishing trips, dinner menus. But near the end, the tone changed. "Evelyn-'s been distant, more than usual. She watches me like I'm already gone. Saw her with Langston yesterday. Closed doors, didn't tell me why. My chest's been tight again. She says it's stress. I'm starting to wonder." And then this, scrawled in the margin of the very last page. "If anything happens to me, look at the tea." My hands trembled. It wasn't just suspicion. He knew, he died knowing. When I got home the next morning, Evelyn was already waiting. She was sitting in the parlor, dressed immaculately in gray silk, a cup of tea balanced perfectly in her hand. "You went to see Langston," she said, not looking up. I didn't respond. "You're making yourself sick, Rebecca," she continued, voice smooth as marble. "Digging up ghosts. Your father was not a good man. You're just too blinded to see it." I stepped closer. "So you killed him." A pause. She sipped her tea, calmly, deliberately. "I freed him," she said. The words hung there like smoke, thick and choking. She looked at me then, and I saw something terrifying in her eyes, not rage, not guilt. Peace. "You think you're doing this for justice, but you're just like him, always needing to know, needing control. He thought the truth would save him too." She set the cup down and stood, suddenly inches from me. "But some truths are poison, Rebecca. Drink enough of them and you won't just hate me, you'll hate yourself." I didn't speak. I couldn't. She walked past me, brushing my shoulder gently with her fingertips. "Be careful what you resurrect," she whispered. "The dead don't like being disturbed." I didn't sleep that night. Her words gnawed at me. Was I becoming her, or was I becoming something worse? But then I thought of my father's journal. His fear. His final warning. He trusted me, even if it was only in the margins of a notebook, and I wasn't going to fail him. The next day, I drove to Baton Rouge to a private forensic lab. I handed over a sealed bag containing a white porcelain teacup and a tiny envelope of tea leaves I had saved from the pantry. I paid in cash. They said they'd call in 72 hours. I didn't tell them it was murder I was testing for. I didn't have to. Sometimes the dead don't speak in words. They whisper through residue. The house spoke to me that night. Not in words, of course, not in any language the living use. But I heard it in the creak of the banister, in the long moan of the wind slipping through the attic vents, in the hollow thump of something shifting behind the walls. I was in my father's study, surrounded by shadows that hadn't moved since the day he died. His leather chair still held the imprint of his last sit. His pipe sat untouched on the tray, as if waiting to be lit. I was waiting, too. The lab had said 72 hours. It had only been 34. But time had become elastic, stretching, snapping, curling around me like a noose. Evelyn hadn't spoken to me since our last exchange. She moved through the house like a specter, eerily quiet, perfectly polite. She no longer looked at me like a daughter. She looked at me like an opponent, and she was right. This wasn't about family anymore. This was war. I began searching his study more carefully, not for comfort, for answers. The bookshelves were dense, but I remembered how he used to keep certain volumes double-layered, hiding journals, old receipts, things he didn't want Mother to find. Behind a copy of Wuthering Heights, I found a dusty leather folder labeled, "Mistrust, keep private." Inside, copies of medical prescriptions, dated just weeks before his death, none of which matched anything in his official health records. A bottle of heart medication he never filled, and 3 receipts from a local apothecary that I had never heard of. More curious still, one of the receipts was signed. Not by him, but by Evelyn, and scrawled beneath it in red ink in his own hand, she switched something. I felt a chill run down my spine. He hadn't just feared she was poisoning him, he'd caught her doing it. The apothecary still existed, barely. A crumbling old storefront tucked behind a row of tourist traps in the French Quarter. I drove there the next day, with the folder pressed against my chest like armor. The shop smelled of dried herbs and history. A bell jingled above the door as I stepped inside. An elderly woman appeared from the back. Wispy gray hair, long bony fingers. She looked at me like she'd been expecting me for years. "You're Evelyn's girl," she said. I froze. "How do you?" She chuckled, soft and hoarse. "She used to come here, years ago. Said she needed something to calm the nerves. But she never looked nervous to me. She looked hungry." I laid the receipts on the counter. "Do you remember selling these?" She peered at them through a magnifying lens. "Yes, this was my handwriting. I sold her oleander extract, said it was for migraines." She met my eyes, but I warned her, even a few drops could kill. My hands curled into fists. "Did you report it?" She shook her head. "People like your mother, they don't get reported. They erase things before anyone can write them down." Back at the house, Evelyn was waiting again. She was sitting by the fireplace, this time in my father's old chair. One leg crossed elegantly over the other, swirling a glass of brandy. "You went to see Marion," she said, voice light. I didn't answer. "I assume she told you I bought poison, that I might have used it." "You did use it," I said. A smile curled her lips, but her eyes were sharp as razors. She stood circling me like a hawk. Me. I taught you to think, to survive. Everything you are, this clever little game you're playing, you learned it from me. I took a breath. No, I'm not like you. She laughed softly. Aren't you? Look at yourself. Lying, spying, plotting, that isn't grief. That's vengeance. And vengeance, sweetheart, is the blood we share. That night, I dreamed of my father. He was sitting at the kitchen table, holding his cup of tea, staring at me. Not smiling, not speaking, just watching. When I woke up, the phone was ringing. It was the lab. Miss Mercer, the voice said, professional and grave, the tea sample tested positive for digitoxin, a cardiac glycoside, highly toxic, consistent with oleander. I closed my eyes, so it was real, every suspicion, every whisper, every journal entry, she had killed him. But here's the thing no one tells you about getting the truth: it doesn't bring peace, it brings decision. Now I had to choose what to do with it. I could go to the police, hand over the letters, the records, the test results, but I knew Evelyn. She had friends in the legal system. Influence. Charm. She could tie it up for years, claim it was circumstantial, or that my father had a heart condition. I needed something more, something she couldn't wiggle out of. So I turned to the one place I hadn't yet looked. The basement. We hadn't used it in years. The light flickered. The air was thick with mildew and rot. It was the one part of the house Evelyn never cleaned, never entered, which made it perfect. I brought gloves, a flashlight, and determination. It took me an hour, but behind a stack of paint cans and broken furniture, I found an old cedar chest. Locked, I pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, notebooks, letters, a safe deposit box key. And God help me, an old audio recorder. It still worked. I pressed play. This is Robert Mercer. If you're hearing this, I'm likely dead. My heart stopped. I believe my wife, Evelyn, is trying to poison me. I've kept evidence. It's in the journals and the receipts. She's meticulous, but not perfect. And Rebecca, if you're the one who finds this, I'm sorry. I should have protected you better. I hope, somehow, you'll do what I couldn't. The tape ended, and I cried for the first time in months, but not because I was broken. Because now I had everything I needed. She wouldn't survive what was coming next. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, because I was ready. For the first time since my father died, I felt something close to clarity. The kind that burns like alcohol on an open wound. Painful, but clean. I spent the entire night organizing everything: letters, audio recordings, receipts, chemical reports, my father's journals. I didn't just want to bring Evelyn down, I wanted the world to watch her fall. By morning, I had created 3 folders, 1 physical, 2 digital. The physical copy was going to a journalist, a woman named Lara St. James. Investigative, relentless, hated by every judge in Louisiana, which meant she was doing something right. The second copy I uploaded to an encrypted drive sent to a lawyer I knew in Chicago. Someone my mother had never met. Someone loyal to the truth, not the name Mercer. The third I kept, not for leverage, for insurance. When I walked into the dining room that morning, Evelyn was already seated, flipping through a fashion catalog like the world wasn't collapsing around her. She glanced up. You look tired. I am, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Busy night. Oh, I've been writing. She arched a perfectly plucked brow. A novel. A confession, I replied, smiling faintly. She paused just a beat, then returned to her page. The first strike came at noon. I leaked one of the letters to a gossip column, just one. No names, just enough details to make the city buzz. The letter hinted at an affair, at wealth, at the wife of a well-known businessman plotting her way into widowhood. By 3 p.m., our landline had rung 6 times. By 6, the doorbell. By 8, Evelyn had her first scotch in years. She didn't say a word about it, but I could feel it, the shift, the fracture forming behind her eyes. Control was slipping, and Evelyn hated nothing more than losing control. That night, I heard her pacing, back and forth across the hallway, over the creaking floorboards of her bedroom. I imagined her checking bank accounts, calling old friends, sniffing for betrayal. She didn't know it yet, but I had already changed all the passwords, locked down everything my father had left, and soon I would take what Evelyn valued most, her name. The next morning, she was waiting for me in the kitchen. She was dressed like she was going to war, black silk blouse, high-waisted slacks, red lipstick so sharp it could cut glass. I know what you're doing, she said. I set my mug down calmly. Then stop me. Her eyes narrowed. Do you think anyone will believe you? A grieving daughter, clearly unstable, accusing her own mother of murder based on what? Love letters. Home remedies, tea leaves. I have a recording, I said softly. She froze. My father's voice, describing what you did, naming names, including yours. Silence fell like a guillotine between us. I'll deny it, she whispered. I know, I said. That's why I made copies. She stepped forward, slow, deliberate. What do you want, Rebecca? She asked. But it wasn't a plea, it was a test. I met her gaze. I want the world to see you as you are. She laughed, low, bitter. You think this is about truth? No, sweetheart, this is about vengeance. And you've got the taste for it now, don't you? Maybe she was right, but I didn't care. 2 days later, the article hit the front page. Mercer mystery. Was Robert Mercer's death really natural? There was no mention of Evelyn's name, but the clues were obvious. Her phone began ringing off the hook. Socialites canceled brunch. Her charity board quietly postponed a vote she'd been waiting 6 months on. And for the first time, I saw her mask slip. Just slightly. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood at the window, staring at her reflection in the glass, fingers trembling around a cigarette she hadn't smoked in years. She didn't even light it. But Evelyn wasn't finished. The next morning, I found my room ransacked. My laptop smashed. My documents gone. All except the originals, locked in the safe at the lake house. She didn't know I'd thought that far ahead. But her message was clear. If you want war, I'll give you war. So I escalated. I mailed a full packet, evidence, timeline, and transcript of the recording to the local police. I didn't expect them to act fast. They wouldn't arrest a Mercer without pressure. That's where Lara came in. By the end of the week, her expose would go live. With names, photos, and Evelyn's smiling face on the cover. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was empty. Because the closer I got to justice, the further I drifted from who I used to be. The girl who believed in fairy tales. The daughter who brought her mother breakfast in bed. The child who thought love could fix broken things. That girl was gone, and what replaced her was someone Evelyn would be proud of. That terrified me more than anything. That night, I returned to the lake house. I needed space, silence, air that hadn't been poisoned by secrets. But when I opened the front door, I knew something was wrong. The scent of jasmine, my mother's perfume, and on the table, a single envelope. No name, no address, just 3 words written in Evelyn's hand. Let's finish this. I stared at the envelope for a long time. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The message wasn't inside, it was the act itself. She had been here, in his house, in my sanctuary. She wanted to remind me that nowhere was mine, not even the ghosts. I sat down on the same couch where I'd listened to my father's voice on tape. This time, the silence felt different. It didn't comfort, it accused. I opened the envelope with the same caution one might open a coffin. Inside, a dinner invitation. Handwritten in Evelyn's graceful script. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., just us. One last supper before the house burns down. It was signed with a flourish. No name, just a single red lipstick kiss, like a signature, like a threat. I could have refused, I should have. But something inside me whispered, this is it. Not the end of the battle, the turning point. Because Evelyn never invited people to speak. She invited them to surrender. I wore black. Not for drama, not for flair, for mourning. Mourning the final shreds of the girl who once believed her mother was made of roses and poetry, not venom and rot. The house was immaculate when I arrived. Candles lit. Silver polished. Wine chilled. She greeted me in the foyer wearing white. Always the contrast. Always the show. You came, she said, not surprised, just satisfied. I don't like unfinished things, I replied. She smiled. Neither do I. The dining table was set for 2. Fine china, crystal glasses, my father's silver. I noticed the wine already poured. Don't worry, she said, catching my glance. I didn't poison it, not tonight. We sat. For a moment it was almost quiet, almost normal. Then Evelyn said, you remind me of me when I was your age. I took a sip of the wine. That's not a compliment. It should be. I'm not sure who raised me to be this cold, you or your absence. She tilted her head, intrigued. You think cold is a flaw, I think it's freedom. I met her eyes. You killed the only man who ever loved you. How free does that feel? Her lips curled, but it wasn't a smile. You think your father was innocent. I froze. She leaned forward, fingers toying with her fork. You think I did this for money. You think I spent years playing the dutiful wife, just for this goddamn house. Didn't you? I whispered. No, she said sharply. I did it to survive. The air shifted. Something raw bled through her voice, something she hadn't allowed in decades. You were too young to understand, she continued. He wasn't the man you remember. He was charming in public, but behind closed doors. She paused, a long, trembling breath. He controlled everything. What I wore, who I saw, even how much you knew about the world. Every bruise I ever hid under a turtleneck, every time I smiled through a split lip, it was for you. My heart pounded. I tried to leave once. He told me he'd take you away. Said I'd never see you again. And you think I wanted this life? No, I endured it. I swallowed. Then why didn't you tell me? Because you were his. You looked at me like I was the villain even before I ever did anything wrong. She gripped her glass, knuckles white. So yes, one night I put the poison in his cup, I watched him drink it, and I felt nothing, not guilt, not triumph, just silence. I didn't speak, because part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to think this was all the twisted result of pain, not greed. But then she leaned back, eyes gleaming again. And I'd do it again, she said. Because in the end, it wasn't justice. It was reclaiming my power. That's what you're chasing too, isn't it? I set down my glass. I'm not like you. Oh, but you are, she whispered. You've become so good at it. The lies, the strategy, the way you turn pity into pressure. You're not hunting me for justice. You're hunting me for satisfaction. She stood, walked to my side, bent down. You hate me, Rebecca, but you understand me, and that's far more dangerous. I looked at her then, truly looked. She wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She was alone. Utterly, profoundly alone. And always had been. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to destroy her or just walk away and let time finish the job. As I turned to leave, she said one last thing. There's something else. Something your father never told you. Check the cellar beneath the rose garden. Before you run to the world with your story, you should know the whole thing. I stopped in the doorway. What's down there? She smiled. Your inheritance. It was nearly midnight when I returned to the house. The wind was still. The moon hung low like an eye that refused to blink. The garden stretched before me in unnatural quiet. The roses, once vibrant and wild, now stood like sentinels guarding something ancient and buried. I brought a flashlight, gloves, and a small shovel. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from something worse, possibility. There had always been whispers about the Mercer land, a family that looked too perfect, a house that stood too proud. And now I was the one peeling away the last layer. I walked to the oldest part of the garden, the center, where the black rose bushes bloomed. My father had called them his obsidian beauties. My mother always refused to tend to them. Now I knew why. I knelt and began to dig. The soil was oddly soft, as if someone had been here recently. 3 feet down, my shovel struck something hard. Wood, old, damp, and rotting at the corners. A small trapdoor, reinforced with iron hinges, hidden beneath the roots of a twisted vine. There was no lock, just a rusted latch. My fingers hesitated. Then I opened it. The air that rushed out was like a breath held too long, heavy, metallic, stale with rot and memory. I climbed down carefully, the narrow ladder creaking with each step. My flashlight flickered across stone walls lined with moisture. The space was small, no larger than a root cellar, but what it contained was larger than anything I could have imagined. A table, a chair, a chain bolted to the wall, a journal and bones. I froze. The skeleton was curled in a fetal position, dressed in rags that had once been clothes. Female, adult, long hair still clinging to the decayed scalp. Shackled at the ankle, not ancient, not a century old. Recent. I wanted to scream, but something deeper, colder told me not to. I stepped toward the journal. It was wrapped in a piece of oilcloth, the initials RM carved into the leather. My father's journal. Not the one I found before. This one was older, darker. I opened the first page. April 4, she found me again, said her name was Lillian now. Same eyes, same lies, said I owed her. But I don't owe her a damn thing. I flipped forward. May 11, Evelyn doesn't know. She thinks I'm paranoid, but the woman is dangerous. She came back into my life like a curse. She knows too much. I can't let her go to the police. Not now. Not when the trust is about to finalize. Further still. June 2, I've locked her in the garden cellar. It's temporary. Just until I figure out what to do. She says she's pregnant. I don't believe her. My vision blurred. No. No. This wasn't Evelyn's secret. This was his. He'd held someone captive in this house, beneath our feet, and she had died down here. Alone, forgotten, a woman erased. I stumbled back from the table, bile rising in my throat. Everything Evelyn had said, every cruel whisper I'd dismissed as manipulation, had been true. Not the whole truth, no, but enough. The woman's name was Lillian. The journal confirmed it. She had once been involved with my father before Evelyn. Maybe before me. I turned to the last page. August 17, she's gone. I didn't mean for it to go that far, but it's done. Evelyn found the journal. I begged her to burn it. She said she'd keep it for insurance. I don't know what that means. I closed the book slowly. Insurance. This was why Evelyn had endured him, why she hadn't left, why she had stayed silent. She knew, she had always known. I climbed out of the cellar at dawn, the sky bleeding red across the horizon. I buried the trapdoor again, covered it with dirt, replanted the roses. Then I went inside, washed the soil from my hands, and sat in the kitchen. Evelyn was already there. Waiting, she poured me tea, didn't say a word, just placed the cup in front of me and watched. I didn't touch it. "You found her," she said quietly. I nodded. She exhaled slowly, like someone who'd been holding their breath for years. "I was pregnant when he brought her here," she said. "You were barely forming. I wanted to leave him then. But if I did, he would have buried me the same way." "Why didn't you go to the police?" I whispered. Her smile was bitter. Who would they believe, the golden husband or the quiet wife with secrets of her own? Silence. Then I asked the question I had avoided all my life. "Did you love him?" Evelyn looked at me. "No," she said, "but I loved the idea of him, and then I hated the reality, so I stayed. And when he gave me no way out, I took one. For a moment, we were just two women in a kitchen. Not enemies, not conspirators, just survivors of the same man, but the war wasn't over. Because now I had two truths, one about her, one about him, and the world would only believe one story." That night, I stared at the folder marked evidence. I picked up my father's journal, and for the first time, I hesitated. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, in the kitchen where everything had unraveled, watching the light shift through the window. The folder sat on the table like a ticking bomb. The journal lay beside it, silent, damning, two weapons, but I no longer knew which one was aimed at who. At 7:00 a.m., the phone rang. It was Lara St. James. Her voice, sharp and urgent. "Rebecca, the story goes live tomorrow. Final edits today. I just need your word. Are we still running this?" I looked down at the folder. The letters, the test results, the photos of Evelyn, the clipped, precise handwriting. Every piece pointed to her as the villain in a tragedy I thought I understood. And yet, I turned to the journal. My father's voice, not from a cassette this time, but etched into every ragged page. The desperation, the violence, the cover-up. I could hear Evelyn's voice echoing in my head. He would have buried me the same way. She hadn't just murdered a husband. She had survived a captor. And maybe she had saved me from becoming just another woman buried beneath the roses. "Rebecca?" Lara pressed. I didn't answer right away. Then, "Give me 24 hours, I said. 24 and not a minute more, she warned. Truth doesn't wait forever, but truth also destroys. And some truths tear down more than they fix. I needed to talk to someone outside of the house. Someone who didn't belong to the Mercer name. Someone who didn't wear silk gloves while holding secrets. I drove to Marta's apartment. She looked shocked when she saw me. Maybe because I hadn't come to her since I started fighting. Maybe because I looked like I hadn't slept in days. She let me in, gave me tea, didn't ask questions, until I asked one. "Did you know about the woman in the cellar?" Her hands trembled around the cup. Slowly, she placed it down. "She was real," she whispered. I nodded. "She wasn't some family scandal, some rumor. No, her name was Lillian. My father kept her there, and my mother knew." Tears welled in Marta's eyes. "Oh my God. I don't know what to do with it," I admitted. I was ready to ruin Evelyn. I wanted the world to see her as I do. But now, he wasn't who I thought either. And if I expose her, I'll bury him. I'll bury both their legacies, our name. Everything. Marta took my hand gently. "Then ask yourself this. Are you protecting the truth or protecting your pain?" I drove home in silence. I didn't have an answer, because I wasn't even sure which version of myself I was anymore. The daughter, the avenger, the survivor, or something else. I stepped into my father's study again, sat in his chair, opened the journal to the last entry, and I wrote beneath it, "I don't know if you deserve to die, but I know she didn't deserve to live afraid." Then I closed it. That night, Evelyn came to my room. She didn't knock, she didn't ask permission. She sat at the foot of my bed like she used to when I had fevers as a child. "You found her," she said softly. "I did. I knew one day it would happen." We were silent for a long moment. Then she asked the question I hadn't expected. "What are you going to do with it?" I looked at her, really looked. The lines beneath her eyes, the shake in her fingers, the wear of time, guilt, and control. "I haven't decided." She nodded. "You're the only one who ever could." And then she stood. Before she left, she turned and said one more thing. "I didn't kill him because I hated him, Rebecca. I killed him because I couldn't let you become him." I spent the rest of the night in the study. Burning pages, not all, just some. The ones about Lillian, the cellar, the worst of it. I didn't do it for Evelyn, I did it for me, because vengeance is a flame, and I had lived in it long enough. I still had proof of her crime, but now it wasn't about revenge, it was about balance. The next morning I called Lara. "I have a revised version of the story for you," I said. "Less sensational, more focused. The letters, the medical reports, the tape, the affair, the motive, the poison, but nothing about the cellar, nothing about the bones, or the woman lost beneath the roses. Some stories aren't meant for the world. Some are just meant to haunt the ones who lived them." When the article published, Evelyn's world cracked, but it didn't shatter. There were investigations. Whispers, disgrace, but no handcuffs, no courtroom, just silence. The same kind of silence she had once used as a shield. Now it was her prison. I moved out 2 weeks later. Took nothing but my father's journal, one of my mother's roses, and a tape recorder I never played again. Sometimes I still hear them, both of them, in my dreams, arguing, whispering, begging me to take their side, but I don't, because they both lied, and I'm done choosing between ghosts. 6 months passed. I moved to Charleston, got a small apartment above a bookstore, started working part-time as an archivist. Ironic, I know, for someone who'd spent half her life trying to erase the past. I grew plants on the balcony. None of them were roses. Most nights I slept. Some nights I dreamed. Dreams of buried women, of tea turning black in a porcelain cup, of Evelyn's voice saying, "He's not finished with you." But I told myself I was done. I told myself the story was over, until the letter arrived. It came in a plain envelope, no return address. Just my name, my new address, my new life. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, faded, a child, maybe 4 years old, standing in a yard I didn't recognize, holding a ragged stuffed bear. But the eyes, they were mine. Or no, not mine, his, my father's. I flipped the photo over. One line written in pencil, shaky and uneven, "He was here before you." I dropped the photograph. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Who was this boy? What did Evelyn say? She said she was pregnant. Lillian, the woman in the cellar, was this? No, it couldn't be. But the more I stared, the more the possibility dug into me like thorns. I called Marta. Her voice on the other end was hesitant, old grief still clinging to her syllables. "I need to ask you something," I said. "About Lillian. Do you remember anything unusual? Anyone else?" There was a pause, then so soft I almost missed it. "There was a child once, a boy. She cried for him, begged to see him, but I never saw him in the house. Only heard sobs, tiny ones, from below, but I thought I was imagining it." She was silent again. Then, "You think he's alive?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know what I wanted the answer to be. I spent the next 3 days in a fog, tracing the photograph, the paper, the handwriting, no leads. Until I did something I swore I'd never do again. I returned to New Orleans. The house stood like a corpse waiting for burial. Evelyn hadn't left it, but she no longer lived in it either. She existed there, ghost-like, fragile. She looked surprised to see me, but not angry. She simply said, "So, you found him." "I found a photo," I said. "That's all." Her eyes dimmed. "That's enough." I stepped inside. The scent of jasmine was faint now, fading. We sat in the living room. I pulled the photograph from my coat. "Who is he?" Evelyn looked at it for a long time. Then, with a voice so low I had to lean in, "Your brother." I didn't speak, I couldn't. "Lillian was telling the truth," she said. "He was born before you. Hidden, your father took him away before I ever saw his face, said he'd handle it. He said he'd place the boy somewhere safe, but safe meant forgotten, erased." I looked at her. "You knew, and you never told me." She looked up, her face pale, eyes rimmed red. "I didn't know he was alive. I thought Robert had done something worse." My stomach turned. "But if someone sent that photo now," I whispered, "he must still be out there." Evelyn nodded slowly. "And whoever sent it wants you to find him." That night I couldn't sleep, not because of guilt, not because of fear, but because something new had bloomed in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope for redemption. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a piece of this family that wasn't soaked in lies. Maybe this boy, my brother, was still out there, and maybe he had questions too. So I did what I always do. I began to dig. This time, not into the dirt, but into the past, the records, the timelines, the places my father traveled during the months Lillian was kept beneath our garden. And finally, one small clue. A clinic, outside Baton Rouge, a record under the alias L. Price. No birth certificate, but one line caught my eye. Infant transferred to St. Callista's orphanage. No guardian listed. My breath caught. St. Callista's, it had burned down 15 years ago, but survivors had been relocated. One name stood out. Aaron, a boy, born 1989, no known family, fostered out of state, no adoption record. My hands trembled. If it was true, if this boy was him, then the story wasn't over. It had just begun again. The bus ride to Alabama took 8 hours. I spent every minute memorizing his face. Well, what I thought was his face. A yearbook photo from 5 years ago, found in an alumni archive of a small-town high school. He wasn't smiling. His jaw was tense, his eyes half-lidded, suspicious, as if even then he knew someone was watching. The name on the record, Aaron Price, but I knew that name was borrowed, just like his origin. I arrived in Talistan just before dusk. It was the kind of town where mailboxes still had names painted in cursive and gas stations doubled as diners. Everyone knew everyone except him. I found him working at a repair garage on the edge of town. He was taller than I expected. Thinner, too. His hair was dark, shaggy, his eyes the same shape as mine, only harder. Eyes that didn't trust easily. I waited until he finished with a customer, then I stepped forward. "Are you Aaron Price?" He wiped his hands, glanced up, and I swear for a second his face froze. Not confusion, recognition. He knew me. "Depends who's asking," he said. I took a slow breath. "My name is Rebecca Mercer. I think I'm your sister." His face didn't change, not at first, then a flicker, a muscle twitch in his jaw, a flash in the eyes that looked like fear or maybe fury. "You shouldn't have come here," he said flatly. "Why?" I asked. "Because it's true." He turned away. "Because it's too late." He didn't slam the door in my face, but he didn't invite me in either. Instead, he led me to an old trailer behind the shop, offered me water, and sat opposite me at a flimsy kitchen table. The silence stretched long between us. Then he said, "She told me you'd come someday." I blinked. "Who?" "The woman in the walls," he said. "The one who cried in her sleep." I realized he meant Lillian. "You remember her?" "I remember the dark," he said. "The cold. The way she whispered my name like a secret. I was only 4 when they took me, but I remember her voice. It's the only thing I didn't forget." He looked up and suddenly I saw it. That emptiness. That old grief polished into armor. "I don't even know what I came here hoping to find," I admitted. "Answers? Closure? Maybe just someone else who knows what it's like to come from that house." He chuckled short, bitter. "You came to feel less alone." "Yes," I said. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Then let me tell you something that'll make you feel even lonelier. I've known about you for years." My heart stopped. "What?" "Your father visited me once," he said. "Not long before he died. Showed up at my school, didn't say his name, but I knew. He looked at me like I was a mistake." I swallowed hard. "What did he say?" "He said my mother was gone. Said I had nothing to gain by digging into the past. And then he gave me money, told me to disappear." "And you did." Aaron shrugged. "What choice did I have?" I looked down at my hands. "He told me you didn't exist. He told everyone I didn't." The room was too quiet, the air too still. Then Aaron said something that cracked the surface of everything. "I used to dream about killing him." My eyes met his. "I used to dream about it too," I said. Something shifted between us in that moment. Not closeness, but clarity. We were mirror images of the same wound, one left in a cellar, one left in a lie. He stood and walked to a drawer, pulled out an old cassette. "I found this in a box that belonged to the nuns who raised me," he said. "They never played it, but I did, once." He handed it to me, no label, just a faint smudge of red lipstick maybe. "What's on it?" I asked. He looked away. Her voice, saying my name over and over. I pressed the cassette to my chest. I didn't cry, not then, but I would. Later, alone, before I left, I asked him one last question. "Do you want to know who she became?" "Evelyn." He stared out the window for a long moment. Then, not really. Why? Because it won't change what she let happen. He turned to me, but I do want to know one thing. What? He studied me, then asked, when you found out who your father really was, why didn't you burn the whole thing down? I smiled bitterly, because then I would have become him. I offered to stay, he declined, but he didn't say I couldn't come back. And that somehow was enough. I left Talistan just before nightfall, the cassette in my coat pocket, the weight of another life tucked behind my ribs, and a single, quiet thought blooming inside me like a slow, persistent fire. This story isn't over. I returned to New Orleans in the rain. The cassette lay in my coat pocket like a second heart, heavy, quiet, waiting to be played. It was Lillian's voice, her final words. The only fragment she had left behind, passed from nun to child to sister. I had listened to it once. It broke me in places I hadn't known were still breakable. She whispered Aaron's name again and again, soft, cracked, desperate. And once she whispered mine. If you ever hear this, if you're the daughter, please don't forget us. Don't let him win. The Mercer estate stood like it always did. Grand, withering, hungry. Evelyn was in the parlor, seated in the same chair where she had once planned a murder. She didn't look up when I entered. I thought you might come back, she said. I stood in silence. I met him, I finally said. Aaron. That made her flinch. He's alive, and he remembers. Not everything, but enough. She set her glass down with trembling fingers. He has her eyes, she whispered. I saw them once in a dream, like she was looking back at me, judging me. He wants nothing from you. Good, she said, sharper, because I have nothing left to give. I pulled out the cassette and placed it on the table. She stared at it. Do you know what's on this? I asked. She didn't respond. It's her voice, Lillian, the woman in the cellar, the mother of your husband's secret child, the ghost you helped silence. Evelyn slowly reached for it, held it like it might burn her. I was going to release it, I said, along with everything else, the journal, the photos, the truth. Her eyes flickered, fear maybe, or exhaustion. But I didn't, I continued. Because some things aren't meant for the world. They're meant for the ones who lived them, the ones who survived. She looked up at me for the first time in years, not as a threat, but as a mirror. I want to know why, I said. Not about the murder, not about the lies. I want to know why you stayed. She took a long breath. Because I loved you, she said. And I knew that if I left, he'd raise you in his image. I stayed to protect the part of me that could still feel love. And did you? She looked at me, eyes hollow, voice quiet. I failed. There was nothing left to say after that, so I left the cassette, not for justice, not for revenge, but so she would never again pretend that the past didn't speak. A week later, Evelyn Mercer was found dead in her bed, peacefully, alone, no suicide note, no will, just the cassette still spinning in the player. And a single rose on her nightstand, black, full bloom. I didn't cry, I didn't smile. I simply stood beside her casket at the smallest funeral money couldn't buy and whispered, "You were wrong. Silence doesn't protect. It only delays the reckoning." 2 months later, I published the story, not under the Mercer name, just Rebecca. It was called The Garden Beneath Her Feet, and it told everything, not to punish, but to warn, to say, we are not born into darkness, we are led there. And someone someday must light the match. Aaron read it. He didn't say much, just sent me a single text. I heard her again, in your writing. I planted a new rose bush in Charleston. Not black, not red, white, for Lillian, for Evelyn, for the parts of myself that would never fully heal, but would keep growing anyway. And if you're reading this, tell me your story, tell me the silence you survived. Because some ghosts only rest when someone finally speaks for them.